Hi, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch. I'm Joe Gibson. This is Doug Gibson.
Hello.
And I'm working on a Godzilla Minus One review that you'll see shortly. But it also inspired the question, is Minus One or Godzilla 1954 better? The original Gojira or Godzilla Minus One, which is the better movie? People always discuss those two as the two best ones. Now, I've got it down to a short list of those two. The original King Kong vs. Godzilla, Terror of Mechagodzilla 1975, GMK, and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. But, for the intents and purposes of this, these two. And do you have any others that you want to briefly
Well, I
mention?
think Godzilla versus Hedorah is a great film, but
Yeah.
basically, I think the first and the last are the ones that are probably the best. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to have a bit of an informal debate here on which one's better. See if we can change your minds or if we represent your views or not. You can leave a comment as well. But so, Dad, you're defending that Minus One is better, right?
Yes, I think it's a little bit better. I think both movies are superb, but I think Minus One is better because there's a greater depth to the story and the characters. Having said that, that's the main reason I think the movie is better. I think it's more gorgeously shot also. I would actually prefer to more of a darker ending for Minus One, but at the same time, I'm very pleased with the ending because I cared so much about the characters. But I just think it's a little bit more depth of how one person is dealing with regret and sorrow. And it forces this guy, our protagonist, he can't even enter a relationship that's so essential to his life because of his guilt that he caused other families to be split apart. Now, in the first movie, the guy feels a lot of guilt for what's happened. He's able to, well, I don't want to give too much because you're going to talk about it, but I just felt there was more attention paid to the angst of what the protagonist in Godzilla Minus One was doing.
Okay. So that's your opening statement. I'll also give one for myself. I've taken some notes on what you're saying, so I can respond to that in a second. But first, I'll grant that the positives I'll discuss in my review are still factors, and you'll hear that in a little bit. But also, I will also grant that Minus One has insanely high highs, mainly due to how this increased runtime and depth and breadth of focus into Shikishima allows for truly great storytelling. However, holistically, the original film has fewer issues, I find, and thus is the better and more consistent movie. My main issue with Minus One that I'll introduce here is that the Ginza set piece is kind of messy, like logistically speaking. There's also a Ginza set piece in 54 that Minus One was referencing, and we can directly compare those two. Yes, the special effects are breathtaking in Ginza in Minus One. They were for the time in 54 as well. We all forget that. But our main characters are out of danger for the Ginza and Godzilla attack sequences in the thing. So the briefest of run-throughs of 54, he awakens, destroys some fishing boats and nearby boats to reference the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident of 1954. Much of the subtext of the movie comes from that. Anyway, Odo Island, the characters go there. They learn about Godzilla. And eventually he attacks them. So that takes you up to Ginza. Our characters are out of danger, but the film sort of transitions to an ensemble in these scenes of all the desperate villagers trying to flee, some of which succeeding, many of which embracing their deaths. It's very moving, and it plays into the character arcs of the film. Emiko is secret keeper to Serizawa's oxygen destroyer, but it's because of these sacrifices that we spend time on, and these brutal, senseless deaths that we spend time on, that motivate her to tell the secret to Ogata, which gets the third eye. So it's all still as crucial as the Minus One Ginza set piece, where Shikishima rescues Noriko, and then Noriko rescues Shikishima, but there's a lot of weird coincidences that happen. First, Noriko falls out of... First she has the grip strength and arm strength to hang on to the train as it's flailing around Godzilla's mouth. She falls out conveniently into water. I'll give that a pass, whatever.
There is you have to suspend disbelief sometimes in the film.
Oh no, I allow for coincidences, but like there are some things that defy explanation, even suspended disbelief, because as it proceeds, she manages to be in just the right place at the right time. He manages to find her. I don't think that that's an issue. I think that, but my mom does think it's an issue that the Shikishima finds Noriko right when Godzilla's about to get there.
Your mother is my wife.
That's a great comeback for a debate. And as it proceeds, they just happen to be lagging behind in the running from Godzilla to where they're the ones farthest back that don't get taken out by the tail swipe. And then Godzilla does his atomic breath. It explodes everything like a nuke. Noriko pushes Shikishima into an alleyway of the only two buildings that the shockwave doesn't destroy.
Okay.
That's a massive contrivance.
Here's what we have to talk about right now. You're talking about consistency in a film. Okay, you're talking about suspension of disbelief. And I guess what I'm talking about is entertainment value, okay? And what is a more narrative crafted film that you really get into? I get into both, but there's a deeper story in Minus One, and there are two separate themes. In Gojira, much of the theme revolves around the Japanese reaction to being hit with nuclear weapons. Minus One's theme, although they do touch that a little bit, is more of one man's shame, regret, and redemption for failing to show what is perceived as courage at the end of World War II.
True. I have in my notes of what you said, greater depth to the story and the characters. It's a better shot. Minus One, I'm talking about. You would have preferred a darker ending, but there's catharsis in all the characters. We spend so much focus and time in Shikishima that he's a very complex character study by comparison to Serizawa, and there's more attention paid to the angst, and you say it's a deeper story ultimately. It's a different focus, and I kind of would argue that there's a lot of ways that they're similar, and a lot of ways that Minus One still ultimately borrows from 54, which indicates 54 to be a great well to draw from. Minus One as is. Odo Island is just the set piece of the end of the war. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the mechanics that are fixing the kamikaze pilots, specifically Shikishima, is the one that lands there. And they discuss that Godzilla is the name of this beast because of the natives, but that's all we get, one throwaway line. Whereas you look at 54, it's a much more thorough exploration of Odo Island. We see the more conservative members of the village, and we see the less conservative members of the village all debating what it actually means. There's into the folklore and the history of, it's a time of less food production. We'll satiate Godzilla by sacrificing a virgin girl to him. That's all very interesting stuff that thoroughly explores that.
Yeah.
But the focus of Minus One is only on Shikishima, and Shikishima's perspective is insanely great. He is the most well-realized character in the entire franchise, no doubt. But Serizawa has always been number two to that. The original Dr. Serizawa, despite having like 5 minutes of screen time or something like that, he's also almost as deeply explored, which means that 54 storytelling is also quite advanced. It just is spread across a more ensemble cast. And there is also depth and matching stakes in terms of Emiko being secret keeper to the plot important thing of the Auction Destroyer, but also secret keeper to her own pseudo-affair with Ogata, which lends more characterization to these things. But yeah, I'll let you respond.
Well, I like, in Minus One, there's kind of a resentment toward the army, okay? It's not keeping their promises and things like that. And I particularly enjoy how people band together as civilians, and they have meetings, and they talk about what they're going to try to do to try to solve a situation that appears to be insolvable. And there's also deep, you know the names better than I do, okay? There's also a lot of pathos in the return of the mechanic who watched this guy abandon all his friends. And I like the way that the protagonist was able to get him back by kind of insulting him in the media. but I'm veering off a little bit right now. But I found it very entertaining how they banded together, and you talked about people's fears on one thing, and they were trying to find a solution. And I'm going to sound so juvenile, but the guy with the wavy hair, okay, who comes
Kenji Noda.
who comes up with the idea, and the idea is a good one, but Godzilla ultimately is so strong that it requires something else. And if I had to say one thing, like I said, entertainment-wise, I like this movie better. I think maybe our protagonist should have met the same fate as
Serizawa, okay.
But once again, it's pleasing to me and very emotional, very hard-hitting when he's reunited with her, even though I agree with you, she shouldn't have survived, all right?
I'm fine with Noriko surviving Ginza, but sorry, I'll get into what you're saying in a second. Noriko has the Godzilla mark on her neck, which means one of two things. One is she didn't survive unscathed and has radiation poisoning just embodied through Godzilla, which is still realistic and fits within the established stakes. Or two, Godzilla's healing factor has translated to her. So as long as we can't rule out that latter category.
It's like a Harry Potter Voldemort thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but to your point, yes, in Minus One, the Japanese government does not care about the veterans and the civilians. That's made perfectly clear through how they cover up pretty much everything. They cover up Odo Island, they cover up Godzilla, they refuse to help the civilian-led effort outside of what the UN pulls their leg to do. The US government also does not help out in Minus One, so it's about these civilians, specifically those poor veterans that already had to go through a war. It's up to them. And to your point about the plan to defeat Godzilla, Noda's idea is the main thing, but Mizushima, the one they call Kid, the guy who looks sort of like a young Akira Takarada, side note, it's his idea to pull Godzilla out of the water if the inflatable things fail, and that has to happen. It's Shikishima's idea to fly the payload into Godzilla's mouth, and so that has to happen. So it is a cooperation of all of the parts in the movie, all the people together, and that's a very good message. But it's also a message about moving on from those scars of the past and rebuilding. Shikishima has to rebuild his life. He rebuilds his house in that montage. He rebuilds a family. And his family unit is himself, Noriko, Akiko, and the auntie Sumiko, also Uncle Akitsu and the other work friends, but mainly those four. And they all lost different people and come from a different perspective in the war. Akiko lost her parents, so did Shikishima and Noriko, but it's different circumstances there, where he was supposed to be a kamikaze pilot, so he feels he's supposed to die, whereas Noriko's parents told her to live, and she finds Akiko's parents tell Noriko to take her. And then you have Sumiko, who lost her own children, so she has the maternal. It's about rebuilding and coming together. And Tachibana also has to forgive Shikishima for those themes to work. I don't think Shikishima can die. We could pivot to this for a minor thing, but arguably, one of the themes of the movie would fall flat if Shikishima did kill himself. What do you think?
Well, you're getting into sort of, for lack of a better term, literary criticism here, okay? I mean, we are at the mercy of what the screenwriters do. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, I have fun doing that too, but I don't. You're saying the story was crafted to where he shouldn't die, more or less.
Tentatively, I'm saying that, yeah. I mean, maybe a rewatch will indicate that he could have still died to serve the theme.
That would have been an homage to Gojira if he died to some degree, wouldn't it?
Yeah, to an extent. 54 is almost more of a pessimistic film, though. Like, we have hearing and chamber committee scenes, but they're filled with much more arguing. Shikishima is actually the aggressor and instigator in the hearing scenes that Noda's presenting his plan in Minus One, but everyone's at each other's throats for their own political ends in 54. Yamane wants to study Godzilla because he managed to survive the nuclear tests, which adds a degree of nuance to the 54 beast that Minus One doesn't have, but Minus One still has complexity in its Godzilla, just not quite as much as 54. In any case, we have the booming, cheery military march every time the tanks come out to stop Godzilla. but they also don't succeed. It's all on Ogata and more so Serizawa. Serizawa's death is treated as a tragedy in the film, though.
It is, you're right. I think that Gojira has a powerful ending where they acknowledge this isn't going to be the end, all right? And I guess showing the wound on the young woman who in the hospital. Once again, I'm not going to try to pronounce their names. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just not as into it. I am, but I just don't do as much reading about it. Could be an indicator of the sequel, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know how it indicates that Godzilla is back. Are we going to have a different Godzilla in the sequel, which has already been greenlit, right?
Well, his heart was so. It
Oh
shows
yeah,
her
that
neck and
final
then his
scene
heart.
showed his heart.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's homaging GMK, which had the same thing happen, but that's homaging Reptilicus. So.
I didn't even remember that part, and that's the film I'm defending. That's silly.
It's fine. It's a very minor. It's sort of tacked on.
Yeah, the thing is, look, they're great films. All I'm saying is, I think they may. For so long, these Godzilla movies turned into kids in short pants yelling, "Come on, Godzilla!" All right, and now you have one that's very close to the spirit of it. And I just think in 2023 did it come out?
And 2024, they released it a couple times.
It's just a better made film. They had more opportunities to create a longer, more complex story, and they have better special effects too.
That's fair, yeah. I mean, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this. I will grant you, both movies are more than the sum of their parts, and for our modern sensibilities, it is entirely a fair thing to say that Minus One reaches higher highs, and if we're just doing it based on the experience, the lows don't really matter comparatively. And also in terms of the more unified vision and the deeper depth into Shikishima than Serizawa or Ogata or Emiko got, we can all trace this back to Takashi Yamazaki, who is the writer, director, and led the special effects in this movie. Oh, yeah.
No, well, I don't want to cut. Don't you think Godzilla Minus One was a deliberate effort by Toho to show Legendary that we can make a darn good movie, even better than you can?
I don't think that, but that's because that's what Shin Godzilla was for. Minus One is actually kind of interesting. They approached him years ago. I don't know if you know about this, but Takashi Yamazaki makes a lot of period movies. He made a trilogy, Always Sunset something, Always Sunset 2 had a dream sequence involving Godzilla in it. It's a very rudimentary design, and so Toho was on a working relationship with him, because this was in the hiatus where there were no more Godzilla movies. They approached him to make a movie, but he turned it down because the special effects weren't there yet to get his vision.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going, but I have a comment to this. Okay.
I guess leading back into my point, this is a difficult thing for me to argue against, that Ishiro Honda did it better, because Takashi Yamazaki is basically modern-day Ishiro Honda plus Eiji Tsuburaya, who was the special effects whiz that made 54 so good. And yes, I will admit that is a very good point you have raised.
Okay, you mentioned Shin Godzilla. I'm sure Shin Godzilla is a great, well-esteemed film within the kaiju universe, all right? But Gojira, whether it's Gojira or Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla Minus One, those are iconic movies, okay? Which have reached wide amount of people. That is why I'm thinking Godzilla Minus One was Toho saying, hey, we can do the same thing. Shin Godzilla may be a fantastic film, but how many people talk about it outside of the kaiju universe?
That's a fair point. Shin Godzilla is more specifically tied to like Fukushima, which came and passed. Minus One, while being a period piece movie that focuses a fair bit on kamikaze and the Tokyo firebombing, as well as the nuclear imagery as well, is more timeless due to its focus on one man's PTSD and how Godzilla weaves into that story.
I just think that I feel like I'm taking the shallower viewpoint here, but I'm just looking at a movie for entertainment value. And I just found it so entertaining. Maybe I was being manipulated by 21st century filming, but I just couldn't, there wasn't a moment of Godzilla Minus One that I that I felt, tired or bored. The movie engrossed me from the beginning.
Pacing, but the pacing is a valid point. I'll even grant that to you. The pacing of -1 is such that there's the midpoint of the movie is Ginza, like mathematically as well as structurally. It's a 2-hour movie. So like from Ginza to the end of the movie does not feel like that long. From the beginning of the movie to Ginza does not feel that long. It's covering very simple ground with comprehensive scenes that don't feel long either. That is something that 54 is a bit slower to that point. It's different approaches, I suppose.
Godzilla Minus One not being nominated for Best Foreign Film or even Best Picture just underscores why I think the Oscars are of less importance.
It was movie of the year. Let's all be honest. Godzilla Minus One is movie of every year because it released in 2023, but then also re-released in 2024. So movie.
It did get an Oscar win, I think.
It did. The franchise's first one. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was for a minor technical thing, right?
Special effects. It deserved that one more than anything else.
Certainly, but it deserved Best Picture. I'm not saying it should have won. Don't get me wrong, but it should have been for Best Picture, at least under foreign films.
That's fair. In terms of your point of the different ways we're approaching this, yeah, I guess I am a little bit more focused on like the bones and the skeleton of it. But that's not everything, The plot and characters will account for most of my score out of 10. However, there's other categories like the special effects, which this film is near perfect. Apparently, there's some things where Godzilla's dorsal fins clip together or it duplicates CGI people. I never noticed those. It's that good where I can't even notice the flaws that are there. What about the soundtrack, though? Which would you argue is the better soundtrack?
Well, I think Gojira has a better soundtrack. It's so iconic and so in your mind all the time. Godzilla Minus One has a good soundtrack, but it only occasionally replicates what's in Gojira, right?
Yeah. 54 took a bunch of different tracks, all with different sorts of moods and different tempos, and put them in the right scenes for the right impact, and they became iconic tracks. -1 utilizes previous tracks very well, though Mahara Mothra and the song from King Kong versus Godzilla they used to get King Kong drunk, those have no reason to appear at the points they do in -1. They're good sounds, but why are they there? Mm-hmm. The rest of -1 soundtrack is just like a bunch of chords, discordant often, back to back, like da 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 da. Don't want to do copyright, obviously, or the other things that feel more like sound effects than music to me. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's something you'll admit that 54 is better on. That's good. Okay.
Well, I'm trying to tell you that I think both are great films. I guess my saying it's better is from a viewer standpoint, and maybe it's from someone who's not into the kaiju thing. I've watched all the Godzilla movies, but I just not into the minutia of it. Okay.
Well, don't sell yourself short. There probably is some more discussion to be had here. We focused mainly on comparing Shikishima to, I guess, every character in -1. How do you feel about the side casts in -1 compared to 54? Do you believe -1 is the better side cast?
Explain side cast again to me.
That's on me for phrasing. So Shikishima's the protagonist. He's the primary character, but I'd also count Noriko and probably even Noda as primary characters, then secondary and tertiary, like Hada and less important.
I don't think there's much difference, except I really like the way they team together and plan to save something. They do it in Gojira also, but I really like the group, the guys on the fishing boat, who band together to save, presumably for at least the rest of this movie, Godzilla, and I like the relationship between the protagonist and the woman and his reluctance due to his guilt and everything to make a commitment. And the baby scenes, are just, it's very strong, tug at the heart. It's more than just a movie about defeating the monster. It's about a man's attempt to climb out of his depression and defeatism and assert himself and make amends and rejoin the world,
And the other characters all do serve that plot well standing on their own as feeling like real people. That's why it's difficult to argue against -1, because though 54 does a very similar trick with its interpersonal relationships and more more in the way of conflict in 54. The conflict between Yamane and Ogata. Is it because Ogata said Godzilla should be killed, or because Ogata's seen his daughter when he's not supposed to be? The conflict between Ogata and Serizawa, they're rivals. There's also more to it than that. But it is refreshing to see the cooperation in -1, so it's very difficult. I'd more say that they're on par, the casts of 54 and -1. -1 may be having a bit of an edge due to Shikishima and the way that everything ties into his central themes. That would give -1 the advantage in characters, but in terms of plot, that's the main crux of my argument
Honda
here.
is a great director. They gave him some crap later in the 70s to do, but he made some really, really good. That Godzilla is a classic, and people who've only seen Godzilla King of the Monsters need to see Gojira. Okay.
It chops up so many of Ogata's scenes in the American version. So do you think Takashi Yamazaki could become better than Ishiro Honda as a director, or is he already, or perhaps he'll never?
See, I'm not criticizing you, but those are things I don't really think about, because you have to look at someone's entire work. And is he going to be better? It's hard to say. You have to look at someone's entire volume of work. He made a very good movie. I don't know if he's going to be better. It's just something I can't tell you an answer to.
That's fair. I think he probably could be. How film works, standing on the shoulders of giants to make the movie.
Look, I shouldn't have been so dismissive of that.
That's fair.
But I don't know the actors' techniques well enough. I mean, you can watch Universal horror films and you can tell when one director is better than another. You can watch monogram movies and low-budget films. You can tell when one director is better than the other. But in these two, I just don't know enough about them. Honda, I think, is a great director. I think he's earned greatness.
Oh, yeah. Honda could elevate crap scripts sometimes.
Yeah, so, I mean, did Honda do Hedorah?
No, that was Yoshimitsu Banno.
Okay, so he didn't do that one. That's another movie I really like, though. But I just don't know. I haven't seen enough of the -1 director's movies.
Yeah, we should keep an eye out for whatever upcoming Takashi Yamazaki movies there are, including the sequel. I don't know if you know. It's probably going to be a sequel, but he's been brought on to make Toho's next.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you want to have a final sum up here?
I guess this became a discussion pretty quickly, but these movies are both so great. If you haven't watched either of them or both of them, please do watch them. Watch them again if you've already watched them. They're quite good, and they can inspire all sorts of discussions. But yes, here at Plan9Crunch...
well, I want to say something too.
You want to say something before we...
I would say if you are not into kaiju, you would first watch -1 because it's a more conventional movie, even though it is kaiju. And then you can appreciate Gojira probably better. If you're into kaiju, you've already seen Gojira. So I would encourage you not to spurn -1 because it's a worthy inclusion in the genre. That's what I'd say right now.
That's fair. And if you have watched many of these movies, you can kind of see where a lot of the inspirations in -1 come from, and then you can craft rewatches of the franchise based on what concepts came from what things. Like, a -1 pulls from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and GMK, as we already mentioned, quite extensively, but while doing its own thing. The idea of an island dinosaur Godzilla is from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which is a far worse movie, but you can also appreciate some aspects of it. So yeah, here at Plan9Crunch, we look at a lot of cult genre things. This week, depending on how things come out, it might be a bit more kaiju heavy, but we'll have my full Godzilla -1 review soon, and then we'll return to normal content. Thank you all for watching. You can watch us on here, Plan9Crunch YouTube. We also have a TikTok. We have a Plan9Crunch podcast and blog on Facebook, and we have a traditional blog. Thank you for watching. That's a wrap.